June 14, 1944. Metz, France. German Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt stands rigid at his command post, studying aerial reconnaissance photographs with intense concentration. His weathered fingers trace the outlines of what appears to be hundreds of tanks, artillery pieces, and supply trucks amassed near Pas-de-Calais. The morning sun glints off his iron cross as he turns to his intelligence officer. The American First Army Group is positioned for a major assault, he declares. 1 million men ready to strike. What von Rundstedt doesn't know, he's staring at rubber tanks, plywood aircraft, and an elaborate web of deception orchestrated by a secret unit of artists, designers, and actors. The Ghost Army of World War II. These 1,100 creative minds would save an estimated 30,000 Allied lives through nothing but illusion. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops was officially activated on January 20th, 1944, at Camp Forest, Tennessee. Unlike other military units measured by firepower or manpower, this one's strength lay in imagination. Renowned fashion designer Bill Blass folded his sketching talents into crafting fake military installations. Ellsworth Kelly, who would later become one of America's most celebrated abstract artists, applied his understanding of shape and form to create convincing decoys. Arthur Singer, a wildlife illustrator whose birds would eventually grace U.S. postage stamps, now painted camouflage patterns to conceal the real and reveal the fake. Colonel Harry L. Reeder, commanding officer of this unprecedented unit, had assembled a creative force unlike any other in military history. Artists from New York's finest art schools, engineers from Hollywood studios, and sound technicians from major radio networks. Their mission? To impersonate other American units to deceive enemy intelligence. We're the first mobile multimedia road show in military history, Sergeant Bob Tompkins wrote in his diary. And the Germans are our audience, though they don't know they've bought tickets. The Ghost Army's arsenal was unlike anything seen before. 82 inflatable tanks that could be deployed in under 30 minutes, dozens of rubber aircraft, and over 100 inflatable vehicles, all manufactured to exact scale and detail. Sonic deception teams equipped with powerful speakers mounted on half-tracks could broadcast pre-recorded sounds of troop movements that could be heard up to 15 miles away. Radio operators created false networks, impersonating the communication patterns of entire divisions. We're creating a combat unit out of thin air, Lieutenant Frederick Fox noted in his field report. A phantom division that exists only in Hitler's mind. By spring 1944, as Allied forces prepared for the Normandy invasion, the Ghost Army was completing its final training exercises. The fate of the European theater would soon rest partly in the hands of set designers, painters, and sound engineers. Their canvas, the battlefields of Europe. Their medium, deception. Their audience, the Wehrmacht's intelligence apparatus. And the stakes could not have been higher. Scene cue. Camera pans across a field of inflatable Sherman tanks gently swaying in the breeze, as artists in uniform apply camouflage, netting, and mud splatters to make them appear battle-worn and authentic. The morning mist creates an ethereal quality, a literal army of ghosts preparing to haunt the enemy's intelligence reports. By early 1944, as Allied forces prepared for the most ambitious amphibious landing in military history, they faced a critical problem. How to convince Hitler's generals that the invasion would strike at Pas-de-Calais rather than Normandy. The solution came in the form of a most unlikely military unit, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, nicknamed the Ghost Army. This unit of 100 men, comprised predominantly of artists, designers, architects, and sound engineers, would execute one of the most elaborate deceptions of World War II. Brigadier General Billy Harris, tasked with forming this unprecedented unit in January 1943, sought talent from unexpected places. Find me artists. Find me actors. Find me men who can create something from nothing, Harris instructed his recruitment officers. The resulting force drew heavily from prestigious art schools like Pratt Cooper Union and the Rhode Island School of Design. Among them was fashion designer Bill Blass, photographer Art Kane, and painter Ellsworth Kelly, creative minds who would turn their talents to warfare. The Ghost Army's arsenal was unlike anything seen before in military history. 4 primary elements comprised their deceptive capabilities. The 603rd Camouflage Engineers created hundreds of inflatable tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces. These rubber dummies, manufactured by the U.S. Rubber Company, could be inflated in under 30 minutes and from 300 yards away were nearly indistinguishable from the real thing. A single 2.5-ton truck could transport an entire inflatable battalion that, once deployed, appeared to be 15,000 troops with supporting armor. The 132nd Signal Service Company, led by Colonel Hilton Howell Rayleigh, operated what they called sonic deception, a sophisticated system of speakers mounted on half-tracks that could project combat sounds with startling accuracy. These 500-pound speakers could be heard up to 15 miles away, broadcasting pre-recorded sounds of tanks moving, troops marching, and bridges being constructed. Sound engineer Harold Flynn noted in his field journal, "The Germans are listening. Every creak of tank treads, every shout of a sergeant, they're collecting it all. Our job is to give them something worth hearing." The Signal Company Special operated fake radio networks, with operators impersonating the radio patterns and verbal tics of actual Army units. They studied the Morse code fist of genuine operators, replicating their distinctive styles to maintain authenticity. Meanwhile, the 406th Combat Engineers created false tracks, disturbed soil patterns, and other physical evidence of large troop movements. Lieutenant Colonel Clifford Simonson, one of the unit's commanders, wrote in a classified memo dated March 12, 1944, "What we're creating isn't just visual trickery. It's a comprehensive sensory illusion. The enemy must see our tanks, hear our vehicles, intercept our communications, and find our footprints. Only then will they believe the lie we're telling." The scale of the operation was staggering. For Operation Fortitude, the deception plan supporting D-Day, the Ghost Army helped simulate the fictional 1st U.S. Army Group, FUSAG, under General George Patton. This phantom army of 50 divisions appeared poised to strike at Pas-de-Calais, drawing German attention away from the actual invasion site at Normandy. German reconnaissance photographs from May 1944 show what they believed to be massive tank formations. In reality, nothing more than cleverly positioned rubber inflatables maintained by artists in uniform. March 18, 1945. The Rhine River. Lieutenant Colonel Clifford Simonson stands on the muddy eastern bank, surveying the mist-shrouded German landscape. Behind him, not a single real Sherman tank rumbles. Not one actual artillery piece awaits firing. Instead, 100 artists, actors, and engineers prepare to execute what will become the Ghost Army's most audacious performance of the war. Operation Viersen, the grand finale in a theatrical campaign of deception that helped secure Allied victory in Europe. Scene Q. Camera pans across inflatable tanks being positioned under cover of darkness, radio operators adjusting equipment, sound engineers checking massive speakers. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, the official designation of what became known as the Ghost Army, was unlike any other military unit in American history. Comprised of artists, designers, sound engineers, and actors recruited from top art schools and advertising agencies, these men wielded paintbrushes and phonographs as their weapons. Their mission? To impersonate other, much larger American units to deceive the German High Command about Allied intentions and troop positions. "We were a traveling road show," recalls Sergeant Victor Dowd, a commercial artist from New York, who created elaborate camouflage schemes. 1,000 men pretending to be 20,000. For Operation Viersen, the Ghost Army would create the illusion of 2 entire divisions, approximately 30,000 troops, preparing to cross the Rhine at one location, while the actual 9th Army would cross elsewhere. The deception would be the Ghost Army's most complex performance, involving all 4 of their specialized companies working in perfect coordination. The 603rd Camouflage Engineers deployed over 600 inflatable tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces, rubber dummies that, from aerial reconnaissance, appeared identical to the real thing. Each could be inflated in minutes and positioned to simulate massive troop concentrations. Captain Ralph Ingersoll, the unit's operations officer, meticulously planned the placement of each dummy to match authentic military formations. The Germans had excellent aerial reconnaissance, noted Colonel Harry Reeder, the Ghost Army's commanding officer. Everything had to withstand scrutiny from 20,000 feet. Meanwhile, the 3132nd Signal Service Company, the sonic deception specialists, positioned massive speakers on half-tracks, capable of projecting battlefield sounds up to 15 miles. Their library contained recordings of tanks moving, troops marching, and engineers constructing bridges, all captured during actual military operations, and now played back in precisely choreographed sequences. Lieutenant Colonel Hilton Howell Rayleigh, who helped develop the sonic deception program, called it an orchestra of war sounds. The 406th Engineer Combat Company created elaborate false signatures, vehicle tracks, bivouac sites, mess areas, while the Signal Company Special handled perhaps the most dangerous element, radio deception. Operators mimicked the communication patterns and operators of the units they impersonated, maintaining the radio traffic expected of 2 full divisions. By March 22nd, the deception was in full effect. German intelligence reported significant American forces preparing to cross at Viersen, exactly as planned. When the 9th Army launched its actual crossing miles away at Wesel, they encountered minimal resistance. The Ghost Army had successfully drawn German defenses away from the real crossing site. The operation saved an estimated 10,000 American lives. But what made these artists such effective deceivers? Major William Blass, a fashion designer before and after the war, explained it simply. We understood illusion, how to create something from nothing. That's what artists do. As the 9th Army pushed deeper into Germany, the Ghost Army quietly packed up their inflatable army, leaving behind nothing but confused German intelligence officers and a mystery that would remain classified for decades after the war ended. June 1945. As the dust of World War II begins to settle, Colonel Harold Maddox walks through a warehouse in Fort Meade, Maryland. Around him stand hundreds of inflatable tanks, wooden aircraft, and rubber artillery pieces, the tools of a deception that helped win the war. His hand runs across a canvas facade painted to look like a Sherman tank. "Destroy all of it," he orders. "No one can know what we did here." The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, nicknamed the Ghost Army, would remain one of America's most closely guarded secrets for decades. The unit's existence was classified until 1996, a full 50 years after the war ended. Even the families of the 1,100 men who served in this extraordinary unit would have to wait half a century to learn what their fathers, husbands, and brothers had actually done during the war. Captain Fred Fox, one of the unit's key officers, returned home unable to tell anyone about the 20 battlefield deceptions he had helped orchestrate. "We came home to silence," Fox later recalled in a 1998 interview. "I couldn't tell my wife what I'd been doing for years. My own children grew up thinking I'd just been a regular soldier." The secrecy was maintained with remarkable discipline. When Private Gilbert Seltzer died in 2021, at the age of 106, he had spent 51 years of his life unable to discuss his wartime service. "They told us not to talk about it, so I didn't," Seltzer explained in one of his last interviews. "For 50 years, my own wife had no idea what I had actually done in the war." The classification was no accident. According to declassified documents from 1945, General Dwight D. Eisenhower personally ordered all Ghost Army operations classified at the highest level. In a memorandum dated August 13, 1945, Eisenhower wrote, "The tactical deceptions employed by the 23rd must remain secret, as similar operations may be necessary in future conflicts." Indeed, the techniques pioneered by these artists would later influence military deception operations in Korea, Vietnam, and the Cold War. According to NSA historian Dr. David Sherman, the Ghost Army's methods became a template for tactical deception that remained relevant well into the 1980s. The silence took a toll. William Blass, who would later become a famous fashion designer, could never publicly acknowledge the 23 deception operations he participated in. "We saved thousands of lives," Blass wrote in private correspondence uncovered in 2002, but could never say a word about it. The veil of secrecy began to lift in 1985 when limited details were declassified, though the full scope remained hidden. A more complete declassification came in 1996, allowing veterans like John Jarvie to finally speak. "After 50 years, Jarvie told the Washington Post, I could finally tell my grandchildren what I actually did in the war." In 2013, the Ghost Army Legacy Project identified 25 still living veterans of the unit, most in their 90s. For these men, recognition came extraordinarily late. The unit's battlefield deceptions had saved an estimated 15,000 to 30,000 American lives, yet remained unknown to the public for generations. Scene cue. Elderly veterans finally opening classified scrapbooks, revealing faded photos of inflatable tanks and hand-painted camouflage, tears in their eyes as they share stories held secret for half a century. The secrecy that protected these men in war had, ironically, obscured their remarkable achievements in peace. But as the classified files finally opened, America would learn about one of its most unusual and effective weapons, an army of artists who fought with creativity rather than bullets. January 1944. The Pentagon, Washington, D.C. Colonel Harry Reeder stares at a classified recruitment list. The names don't belong to hardened combat veterans or tactical experts. Instead, they read like the faculty roster of America's finest art schools: painters, sculptors, set designers, architects. His pen hovers over the document. "Find me artists," General George Marshall had ordered. "Find me men who can create something from nothing." The U.S. Army was about to weaponize creativity in a way Hitler would never see coming. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, soon to be known as the Ghost Army, represented one of the most unusual military units ever assembled. By early 1944, the Allied command recognized that deception would be crucial to success in the European theater. The solution was unprecedented: a tactical deception unit composed primarily of artists, designers, and audio engineers tasked with creating elaborate battlefield illusions. Major Ralph Ingersoll, a former editor of the New Yorker and Time magazines, helped spearhead the unit's formation. "We're looking for men who can think creatively under pressure," he wrote in a classified memorandum dated February 14, 1944. "Men who understand that a brush stroke can be as powerful as a bullet." The recruitment process targeted America's creative institutions. From New York's Cooper Union to the Art Institute of Chicago, talent scouts with top-secret clearances quietly approached promising candidates. The Art Students League of New York alone provided 18 future Ghost Army members. Among them was Bill Blass, who would later become one of America's most celebrated fashion designers. Arthur Singer, an accomplished wildlife illustrator, was working at a routine military desk job when he received mysterious orders to report to Fort Meade. "I thought I was in trouble," he later recalled in a 1985 interview. Instead, they asked if I could paint convincing military vehicles on canvas. The unit actively recruited from Broadway theaters and Hollywood studios. Ellsworth Kelly, who would become one of America's most influential abstract artists, was pulled from camouflage school. Artist and sculptor Harold Lehner was plucked from another unit. "They told me I'd be using my hands," Lehner later wrote in his memoirs, "but not the way most soldiers do." By March 1944, the 23rd had assembled 100 men with an average IQ of 119, significantly higher than the Army's general requirement. 82% of the enlisted men had been to college at a time when only 8% of American males had higher education. The unit was structured into specialized companies. The 603rd Camouflage Engineers, who would create visual deception, the 3132nd Signal Service Company for sonic deception, and the Signal Company Special Handling Radio Counterintelligence. At Camp Forest, Tennessee, this unusual collection of creative minds began training for their extraordinary mission. They learned to construct inflatable tanks that weighed just 93 pounds but looked identical to 32-ton Sherman tanks from a distance. They practiced creating fictional radio traffic that mimicked entire divisions. Sound, engineers recorded actual armored and infantry units, then developed massive sound trucks that could project battlefield noises up to 15 miles. "We're not here to fight a conventional war," Colonel Reeder told his assembled unit in April 1944. "We're here to fight with our minds. Your paintbrushes and your talent are now weapons of war." As D-Day approached, America had assembled its secret weapon, an army of artists preparing to stage the greatest battlefield deceptions in military history. Weapons of deception: inflatable tanks, sound effects, and visual trickery. April 1944. A Sherman tank rolls into position along the English countryside. Its metal hull gleams in the morning sun. German reconnaissance planes capture its image from above. Yet this tank will never fire a shot. Its armor is nothing but rubber. Its weight barely 100 pounds instead of 35 tons. This is the handiwork of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, America's Ghost Army, and their arsenal of deception is about to change the course of the war. The Ghost Army's inflatable arsenal represented one of the most sophisticated deception campaigns in military history. Each rubber Sherman tank could be inflated in just 30 minutes, carried by only 4 men, yet from 600 feet away or from aerial reconnaissance, appeared identical to the real steel behemoths. Lieutenant Fred Fox, one of the unit's engineers, noted in his field journal, "The Germans pride themselves on their intelligence. We're about to turn that pride into their downfall." By May 1944, the Ghost Army had assembled over 300 inflatable tanks, 85 fake aircraft, numerous rubber artillery pieces, and even inflatable landing craft. These weren't mere props, but sophisticated decoys. Each inflatable Sherman featured authentic markings, simulated tracks in the mud, and even carefully placed fuel cans and personal equipment. Major Ralph Ingersoll, a key planner in the unit, wrote, "It wasn't enough to create the illusion of armor. We needed to create the illusion of life around that armor." The visual deception was only one layer of the elaborate ruse. The 3132 Signal Service Company, the sonic deception arm of the Ghost Army, deployed massive sound trucks equipped with state-of-the-art recording equipment. These 500-pound speakers could project battlefield sounds up to 15 miles. Colonel Hilton Howell Rayleigh, who helped develop the sonic techniques, explained in a declassified 1945 report, "We could make the enemy believe an entire armored division was moving through a valley, when in reality nothing was there but sound." The sound engineers meticulously recorded actual tanks, jeeps, and bulldozers moving and setting up camp. These recordings were mixed into intricate 30-minute sonic scenes, played through the night to simulate troop movements. The sounds of tanks being refueled, soldiers shouting orders, and engineering equipment operating created an audio illusion of military might where none existed. Scene Q. Moonlight illuminates rows of rubber tanks as hidden speakers emit the sounds of an army that isn't there. Captain George Rebb, who commanded one of the Ghost Army companies, recalled the attention to detail. "We became experts in military theater. Every fake tank needed real tank tracks leading to it. Every rubber artillery piece needed shell casings scattered nearby. The Germans were looking for patterns of military behavior, so we gave them exactly what they expected to see. These inflatable decoys and sonic deceptions weren't deployed randomly. They were part of carefully orchestrated operations designed to draw enemy attention away from actual troop movements. In Operation Brittany alone, the Ghost Army simulated 2 full divisions, approximately 30,000 men, when they were in fact just 100 artists and engineers putting on the performance of their lives. But the German High Command was watching. And as D-Day approached, the question remained, would Hitler's generals believe what these artists wanted them to see, or would they see through the elaborate charade? March 18th, 1945. The Rhine River. Lieutenant Colonel Clifford Simonson stands in the pre-dawn darkness, watching as his men inflate rubber tanks along the riverbank. The hiss of air compressors mingles with the distant rumble of actual combat 20 miles north. What appears to be the U.S. Ninth Army preparing for a massive assault is, in reality, an elaborate theatrical production. These are not combat soldiers, but artists, architects, and actors of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, America's Ghost Army, about to execute their most ambitious performance of the war. This is our masterpiece, whispers Colonel Harry Reeder, commander of the 23rd 603rd Camouflage Engineers, as he surveys the growing collection of inflatable Sherman tanks and artillery pieces. If we pull this off, we save thousands of American lives. Operation Viersen represented the culmination of the Ghost Army's deception techniques. Their mission? Convince German High Command that the U.S. Ninth Army would cross the Rhine at Viersen when the actual crossing would occur at Wesel, 20 miles north. By March 1945, these 100 artists had become masters of battlefield illusion, deploying an arsenal of deception that included 93 inflatable tanks and vehicles that could be set up in under 30 minutes, 250 speakers broadcasting combat sounds at 90 decibels, audible up to 15 miles away, over 500 fabricated radio transmissions per day, dozens of false command posts with authentic military insignia. The operation began with the Ghost Army physically replacing elements of the Ninth Army along a 10-mile front. As the real Ninth Army secretly moved north, the Ghost Army expanded their footprint to create the illusion of 30,000 troops, where barely 2,100 existed. Corporal Arthur Shilstone, a 22-year-old artist from New York, later recalled a moment that captured the surreal nature of their work. A German patrol came upon us, inflating a rubber tank. They were so surprised that they surrendered to us immediately. Here we were, artists armed mainly with air compressors, capturing actual enemy soldiers. The Sonic Deception Team, led by Major Ralph Ingersoll, positioned their massive speaker systems to broadcast recordings of armored columns moving at night. The sounds, tanks grinding gears, engineers building bridges, troops shouting orders, had been meticulously recorded during actual military operations. German listening posts reported extensive American activity precisely where the Ghost Army wanted them to believe it existed. Radio operators under Lieutenant George Peddle transmitted thousands of fake messages suggesting an imminent crossing at Viersen. They meticulously mimicked the communication patterns and even the Morse code FIS, distinctive transmission styles, of the actual Ninth Army radio operators. The deception proved devastatingly effective. German Field Marshal Walter Model kept his 47th Panzer Corps and 84th Infantry Division positioned to defend Viersen, leaving the actual crossing point at Wesel vulnerable. When the real Ninth Army crossed the Rhine on March 24th, they encountered only a fraction of the expected resistance. General William Simpson, commander of the Ninth Army, later wrote, "The 23rd's deception at Viersen contributed materially to the success of our Rhine crossing, substantially reducing our casualties and accelerating our advance into Germany's industrial heartland." The Ghost Army's performance at Operation Viersen diverted an estimated 13 German battalions from the actual crossing site. The cost in American lives saved remains incalculable, but military historians estimate the number in the thousands. Scene Q. Camera pans across rubber tanks silhouetted against the dawn sky as artists in combat fatigues paint mud patterns on canvas to complete the illusion. July 1944. As Allied forces pushed through France, German intelligence officers pored over reconnaissance photographs, desperately trying to locate the American 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. Their reports showed an entire armored division with 40 Sherman tanks moving toward Brest. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt diverted precious panzer units to counter the threat. But when German forces arrived, they found nothing. The tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces had vanished into thin air. What the Germans didn't know was that they had been fooled by inflatable rubber tanks, sound effects, and carefully crafted radio transmissions, the work of America's Ghost Army. The true impact of the 23rd's deceptions extended far beyond individual battles. Colonel Harold Reese, commander of the 23rd's operational planning, noted in his after-action report, "The enemy wasted critical resources chasing phantoms while real attacks came from unexpected directions." The Ghost Army's operations directly influenced at least 20 major battlefield engagements, including the critical Rhine River crossings where their dummy installations drew German artillery fire away from actual crossing points. Major William Blass, who supervised many of the unit's visual deceptions, calculated that for every rubber tank deployed, approximately 20 German artillery shells were wasted. With over 300 inflatable tanks used throughout the campaign, this represented nearly 6,000 shells fired at non-existent targets, ammunition that couldn't be used against actual Allied forces. Each deception operation tied up an average of 1,600 German troops who could have been deployed elsewhere. The Ghost Army's success remained classified for decades after the war. Captain Gilbert Seltzer, who led many of the unit's engineering operations, couldn't tell his family what he'd actually done until the 1990s. "We were told that what we did might save 10,000 lives, Seltzer recalled in a 1996 interview. "I believe we saved many more than that." Perhaps most remarkably, the 23rd suffered only 30 casualties, despite operating dangerously close to enemy lines. Their ability to convince German forces they were facing much larger units directly contributed to the accelerated Allied advance across Europe. General George Patton, upon learning of their operations at the Rhine, reportedly said, "Those artist fellows are worth their weight in gold." The strategic impact extended to Hitler himself. German high command records recovered after the war revealed that Hitler's decisions about troop deployments in the crucial months of 1944-45 were significantly influenced by intelligence reports that wildly overestimated Allied strength, reports based largely on Ghost Army deceptions. Field Marshal Walter Model, commanding German forces in the West, repeatedly requested reinforcements to counter Allied divisions that didn't actually exist. A declassified 1945 report from Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force estimated that Ghost Army operations effectively tied down 8 German divisions during the final push into Germany, divisions that could have significantly slowed the Allied advance, as Colonel Ralph McAllister of Allied Intelligence noted. The 23rd's greatest achievement wasn't in what they built, but in what they prevented. German forces concentrated where they could do the least damage. Scene Q. Faded military maps show German unit movements responding to phantom armies, while actual Allied advances progress unchallenged in other sectors. January 1942, New York City. The Metropolitan Museum of Art's Grand Hall falls silent as Douglas Fairbanks, Jr., the Hollywood star turned naval officer, addresses a room of unlikely military recruits. Sculptors with clay-stained hands, scenic painters with speckled overalls, fashion designers clutching portfolios instead of rifles. Billboard artists and set designers exchanged nervous glances. These are not soldiers. They are the artists of America, about to become one of the most unusual weapons in the Allied arsenal. Your paintbrushes and chisels will save more American lives than bullets, Fairbanks declares. The statement hangs in the air, both preposterous and profound. The recruitment drive wasn't random. It was the brainchild of Major Ralph Ingersoll, former editor of the New Yorker and Time magazines, who recognized that modern warfare required modern deception. Working alongside Colonel Harry Reeder, they envisioned a unit unlike any other in military history, a battalion of artists, designers, and creative thinkers who would use theatrical techniques to fool the German High Command. By March 1942, the 603rd Camouflage Engineers began formal recruitment. Broadway set designer George Bittinger received his letter while painting backdrops for Rodgers and Hammerstein. Fashion designer Bill Blass was sketching women's coats when military officials approached him. Photographer Art Kane was developing film when his draft notice arrived, with unusual specifications about his artistic background. The requirements were precise and peculiar. The Army needed men who understood perspective, shadow, and form, men who could create illusions and manipulate perception, men who could turn plywood into tanks and rubber into artillery. The average IQ in the unit would eventually measure 119, well above the military standard of 100. Captain Hilton Howell Rayleigh, a theatrical press agent before the war, conducted interviews at New York's 603rd Engineer Camouflage Battalion headquarters. "Can you paint?" he would ask. "Can you sculpt? Can you create something from nothing?" The questions confused many applicants expecting traditional military inquiries. By April 1942, the unit had gathered at Fort Meade, Maryland. Ellsworth Kelly, who would later become one of America's preeminent abstract artists, recalled the surreal nature of their training. "We learned to make rubber tanks that weighed 93 pounds instead of 35 tons, inflatable artillery that 4 men could position instead of requiring heavy machinery, and sound effects recordings that mimicked armored divisions on the move." Arthur Shilstone, a 22-year-old illustrator from New York, remembered his first days with what would become known as the Ghost Army. "We were artists playing soldier, not soldiers trying to be artists." The difference was crucial. The unit's unusual composition raised eyebrows. Harold Dahl, previously a window display designer for Macy's department store, now instructed fellow artists on creating convincing battle damage on fake equipment. Arthur Singer, who would later gain fame designing the popular Birds of North America postage stamps, applied his meticulous eye to painting realistic mud splatters on rubber vehicles. By August 1943, the 603rd had merged with the sonic deception specialists of the 33rd Signal Service Company and the radio experts of the Signal Company Special to form the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, 1,100 artists, actors, sound engineers, and creative professionals preparing to stage the most elaborate battlefield deceptions of World War II, June 4th, 1944. A moonlit field in southern England. Lieutenant Colonel Clifford Simonson of the 603rd Camouflage Engineers stands beside a Sherman tank that weighs just 93 pounds. His hand presses against the olive drab canvas, feeling it give slightly under pressure. The tank isn't real. It's a rubber decoy, one of thousands that would soon fool Hitler's most experienced generals into believing they faced an army that didn't exist. "We're not just making fake tanks. Simonson tells his assembled team of artists, designers, and theatrical set builders, "We're creating an illusion so perfect, the enemy will redirect entire divisions based on what they think they see." The men listening were not typical soldiers. They were sculptors, painters, architects, and set designers. Their weapons were not rifles and grenades, but brushes, inflatable rubber, and theatrical props. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, nicknamed the Ghost Army, comprised 100 men tasked with the most elaborate deception operation of World War II. Formed in January 1944 under the command of Colonel Harry L. Reeder, this unit combined 4 specialized elements: visual deception, 603rd Camouflage Engineers, sonic deception, 332nd Signal Service Company, radio deception, Signal Company Special, and atmospheric effects, 406th Combat Engineers. These artists and creatives designed inflatable tanks, trucks, artillery pieces, and even landing craft that could be deployed overnight and from the air appeared identical to the real thing. Each rubber Sherman tank required only 30 minutes to inflate, but created the illusion of 32 tons of American armor. The Ghost Army deployed over 300 inflatable vehicles at a time, creating phantom divisions where none existed. Billionaire fashion designer Bill Blass, then a young soldier with the 603rd, recalled in his post-war memoirs, "We were told our mission would save thousands of lives, but we could never speak of what we did. It was like being paid to play the most serious game of make-believe in history." The inflatable army wasn't merely static props. To maintain the illusion, the men of the 603rd carefully considered every detail. They created fake tank tracks in the mud using bulldozers. They scattered cigarette butts and coffee cups around fake bivouac areas. They even hung laundry between vehicles. From 600 feet in the air, the minimum altitude for Luftwaffe reconnaissance flights, these details completed a theatrical set worthy of Broadway, Sergeant Victor Dowd, who would later become a renowned illustrator, specialized in painting camouflage patterns on the inflatables. "We weren't just making balloons," he noted in a 1985 interview. "We were creating a complete world that had to withstand scrutiny. The Germans had excellent aerial photography. One mistake, one shadow falling the wrong way, could give us away and cost lives." The Ghost Army's inflatable deceptions were so classified that most American commanders were unaware of their existence. When Major General Bruce Cooper of the 11th Armored Division first encountered the Ghost Army's work near Metz in 1944, he reportedly exclaimed, "I've been outmaneuvered by my own damn army," not realizing he was looking at rubber tanks operated by artists. By war's end, the Ghost Army had conducted 21 major deception operations, often placing themselves perilously close to enemy lines to maintain the illusion. Their rubber tanks and artistic sleight of hand are estimated to have saved between 15,000 and 30,000 American lives by drawing enemy fire away from actual combat units and confusing German intelligence about Allied strength and positions. March 18, 1945. The Rhine River. Lieutenant Colonel Clifford Simonson stands at the edge of the misty riverbank, watching as inflatable Sherman tanks rise from the ground like phantoms in the pre-dawn darkness. The rubber tanks, when fully inflated, cast long shadows across the German countryside, shadows that will soon deceive Hitler's most experienced generals. This operation would become the Ghost Army's final and most ambitious deception of World War II. "We're not just creating an illusion," Simonson tells his officers. were creating history that never happened. Operation Viersen represented the culmination of everything the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops had learned through 2 years of the battlefield deception. Colonel Harry Reeder, commanding officer of the Ghost Army, had received orders directly from General William Simpson of the Ninth Army. Create a convincing diversion to draw German attention away from the actual Rhine crossing points. The stakes couldn't be higher. The Rhine was Germany's last natural defensive barrier, and Hitler had ordered his generals to defend it at all costs. The plan was audacious in its scale. The Ghost Army would impersonate 2 entire divisions, the 30th and 79th Infantry, creating the illusion of 40,000 men with just their 1,100 artists, designers, sound engineers, and radio operators. According to declassified operational plans, they would establish 207 dummy artillery positions, inflate 600 rubber vehicles, and broadcast sonic deception over a 10-mile front. Sergeant Victor Dowd, a former art student from New York who had designed camouflage patterns for the unit, recalled in his post-war memoir, "We knew the Germans were watching. Their observation posts across the Rhine had clear views of our activities. That was exactly what we wanted." The deception unfolded with theatrical precision. Sound engineers under the command of Captain Harold Flynn positioned their massive speakers, capable of projecting battlefield noise for 15 miles, along the riverbank. Their sonic playbook, recorded on wire recorders, included the sounds of pontoon bridges being constructed, tanks moving into position, and soldiers shouting orders. The recordings played through the night, creating an audio illusion of massive troop movements. Meanwhile, radio operators led by Lieutenant George Dramis transmitted over 350 fake messages in 48 hours, creating an elaborate network of false communications that German intelligence eagerly intercepted. According to NSA declassified reports, the Germans recorded and analyzed every transmission, completely unaware they were listening to scripted theater. The special effects culminated on the night of March 24, 1945, when the Ghost Army staged their fake river crossing. Smoke generators created artificial fog banks. Engineers detonated controlled explosions to simulate artillery fire. Searchlights bounced off low clouds to create the illusion of massive activity. Across the river, German General Gustav von Zangen of the 1st Parachute Army responded exactly as the Allies hoped. Intelligence reports confirm he repositioned significant forces to counter the Ghost Army's Phantom divisions, pulling units away from the actual crossing sites at Riesel and Ries, where the British 21st Army Group and the U.S. 9th Army were preparing their actual assault. The real crossings met minimal resistance. While German forces waited for an attack at Viersen that would never come, Allied forces secured their Rhine bridgeheads, with casualties 80% lower than anticipated. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery would later write, "The Rhine crossing was won before the first actual soldier set foot across the river." Scene cue, camera pans across abandoned rubber tanks, deflating in the morning mist as real Allied forces surge across the Rhine miles away. For nearly 5 decades after World War II, the remarkable achievements of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops remained hidden behind the classified stamp of military secrecy. The unit's official records weren't declassified until 1996, leaving these artistic warriors unable to share their extraordinary contributions even with their closest family members. Gilbert Seltzer, one of the Ghost Army's architects, recalled in a 2017 interview, "We were told to keep our mouths absolutely shut. Many of us never told our wives or children what we did during the war. The secrecy was so complete that when veteran Arthur Shilstone finally revealed his wartime role to his wife in the 1990s, she initially thought he was joking. "You did what in the war?" she asked incredulously. For decades, these men carried their secrets silently, their contributions to victory unacknowledged in history books. The Ghost Army's operations had directly influenced the outcome of at least 20 battlefield deceptions between D-Day and the final German surrender. Military historians now estimate that their phantom divisions saved between 15,000 and 30,000 Allied lives by drawing enemy fire away from actual combat units. The 1,100 men of the 23rd effectively tied down German divisions that might otherwise have reinforced critical fronts. Scene cue: faded photographs of aging veterans finally receiving recognition, intercut with archival footage of their wartime deceptions. The unit's techniques would evolve into standard military doctrine. The Soviet Union, having learned of the Ghost Army through intelligence channels, developed similar tactical deception units during the Cold War. The Israeli Defense Forces employed comparable methods during the 1973 Yom Kippur War, creating phantom tank divisions that influenced Syrian deployment decisions. Even in modern warfare, the principles pioneered by these artists continue to shape military thinking about psychological operations and battlefield deception. In 2022, after years of campaigning by veterans and their families, the Ghost Army was finally awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, America's highest civilian honor. Senator Edward Markey, who sponsored the legislation, declared, "The Ghost Army's contributions demonstrate that innovation and artistic skill are as valuable to warfare as traditional military might." Of the original 1,100 members, fewer than 10 were still alive to witness this long overdue recognition. The legacy of the Ghost Army extends beyond military tactics. Veterans like Bill Blass, Ellsworth Kelly, and Art Kane returned from war to revolutionize American fashion, art, and photography. Their wartime experiences manipulating perception and creating convincing illusions informed their post-war creative careers. As Ghost Army veteran Jack Mazey later observed, "We learned to see the world differently in the Ghost Army. Everything became a potential canvas, every space a stage for illusion." Perhaps the most profound legacy of the Ghost Army lies in how it challenges our understanding of warfare itself. In an era of mechanized destruction, these men demonstrated that creativity could be as powerful as firepower, that art could save lives rather than destroy them. Their story reveals that even in humanity's darkest hour, the imaginative spirit found expression in the most unexpected places, on the battlefield itself, where artists waged war with paintbrushes, sound recordings, and inflatable tanks. For nearly 5 decades after World War II ended, the remarkable story of the Ghost Army remained shrouded in secrecy, classified at the highest levels. The 100 artists, designers, sound engineers, and creative minds who had orchestrated one of history's greatest deceptions were forbidden from sharing their extraordinary contributions with the world. Their families never knew the truth. Their sacrifice remained unacknowledged in the pages of history books. The Ghost Army's classification wasn't lifted until 1996, when the U.S. Army finally declassified many of the unit's operations. Even then, certain aspects remained sealed from public view until 2012, when the full scope of their ingenuity was finally revealed. For Ghost Army veteran Gilbert Seltzer, who lived to the remarkable age of 106, the declassification meant he could finally share his wartime experiences. For the first time, Seltzer recalled in a 2013 interview, "I could tell my children and grandchildren what I actually did during the war." The declassification sparked a renaissance of interest in the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. Filmmaker Rick Beyer produced the documentary The Ghost Army in 2013, bringing this hidden chapter of WWII to millions. "These men saved thousands of lives," Beyer noted, "yet received no recognition for decades. Their story represents the perfect intersection of American creativity and military necessity." Many Ghost Army veterans had gone on to distinguished careers in art and design. Bill Blass became a fashion icon. Ellsworth Kelly transformed American minimalist art. Arthur Singer became a renowned wildlife illustrator. Arthur Shilstone established himself as a celebrated watercolorist. Their wartime experiences, creating illusions under the constant threat of death, had profoundly shaped their artistic sensibilities. In 2015, legislation was introduced in Congress to award the Congressional Gold Medal to the Ghost Army veterans. The bill noted that their extraordinary actions saved countless American lives. After years of advocacy, in February 2022, President Joe Biden finally signed the Ghost Army Congressional Gold Medal Act into law, officially recognizing their unique contribution to Allied victory. Of the original 2,100 men, fewer than 10 were still alive to witness this long overdue recognition. John Jarvie, one of the last surviving members, reflected, "We weren't looking for medals. We were just doing what needed to be done. But it means everything to know that America finally understands what we accomplished." The story of the Ghost Army reveals a profound truth about warfare, that creativity, imagination, and artistic sensibility can sometimes prove as valuable as conventional military might. In an era of mechanized destruction, it was human ingenuity that often made the critical difference. The Ghost Army demonstrated that art, normally associated with creation and beauty, could be weaponized to save lives rather than take them. Perhaps most remarkably, in a conflict that claimed over 60 million lives worldwide, the Ghost Army's elaborate deceptions are estimated to have saved between 15,000 and 30,000 Allied lives without firing a shot. Their legacy stands as a testament to human creativity in service of a greater cause, a reminder that even in humanity's darkest hour, our capacity for imagination can become our most powerful weapon.